We're starting with former Brewers general manager David Stearns was officially announced as the Mets' new president of baseball ops on Tuesday morning, filling a position that the Mets owner Steve Cohen had been looking for in the last 2 years. I mean, my thought on this is that David Stearns is a great addition to that Mets front office. He'll work closely with Billy Epler. I think he'll be the final decision maker on how the roster is going to look. I mean, as comes to Pete Alonso, I don't expect Pete Alonso to get traded. I think the Mets are going to extend him. I think he is a guy that I think that the Mets are going to prioritize extending so that he doesn't hit the free agent market. And knowing that Pete Alonso is the face of the franchise for the Mets, Isaiah, you can't really it would be foolish for the Mets to trade Pete Alonso. But I also think that the Mets will keep Pete Alonso. I don't think they're going to trade Pete Alonso. And then the Mets and manager Buck Showalter parted ways on Sunday afternoon following a disappointing 75-87 season in wake of new president of baseball operations David Stearns taking over. I mean, who I think should be the Mets' new manager to replace Buck? Showalter? I think it's got to be Craig Counsell. I think that the Brewers are probably not going to renew his contract. I think David Stearns is going to be on the phone with Craig Counsell, and I also think that Counsell would. I think it would be a decent fit for the Mets. I think Steve Cohen's going to overpay for him, and Craig Counsell I think is going to work with a bullpen featuring Edwin Diaz. I think the Mets are going to be more relevant with him as manager. And I think that the Mets should look into Craig Counsell as David Stearns has a friendship with Craig Counsell. So Isaiah, I'm going to start with you. I want to get your thoughts first on the David Stearns hire as the New York Mets general manager, and then also Buck Showalter stepping down as Mets manager. And then talk about your choice for who you think should be the next manager of the New York Mets.
Laurel, I'm not surprised that David Stearns became the new president of baseball ops for the New York Mets because the Mets have been targeting him for like the last 2 years. And when he stepped down last year from the Brewers and when he took a year off, I thought it was trending this way. I thought it would be an absolute shock if David Stearns did not end up with the Mets. I mean, he grew up a Mets fan. He grew up listening to Gary Cohen on the radio, listening to Mets games late at night, going to Shea Stadium for Mets games. I mean, this dude grew up a Mets fan. He grew up going to games, listening to Mets games. And if he didn't end up in New York, it was because the Mets just severely fumbled getting David Stearns, and that was all it would have, or that's what it would take to not have David Stearns be the next president of baseball ops with the New York Mets. I think the Mets they hit a grand slam with this hire. David Stearns is an outstanding president of baseball operations. He did great things in Milwaukee. They always made the playoffs under his leadership, despite having a very small payroll. The Brewers always overachieved, and now when you think about the Mets, David Stearns is going to have lots of money to spend with Steve Cohen's big wallet. He's great with analytics. He's great finding some low-level players and end up making them into superstars. So I think it's going to be great for the New York Mets. They got a great mind now to spend Steve Cohen's money, and I expect David Stearns to make the New York Mets like the Los Angeles Dodgers and build them into a sustainable winner. I think that he'll be great for the New York Mets. And as far as should they trade Pete Alonso, no, because you need stars to build your team around. You need stars to build winners. And in a city like New York, you need a superstar. And the Mets have Francisco Lindor, but they also have their homegrown player in Pete Alonso. And you got to keep him. You never really get power hit. You can't really groom power hitting first basemen from scratch, and they don't fall on, or they don't grow on trees. So I think for the New York Mets, they have to keep Pete Alonso. He's a homegrown player. You got to keep players like that. And if they keep him with Lindor and David Stearns, I think will definitely transform the roster around them, I think that then the Mets will be able to have a sustainable winning team on the field year in and year out. So I think they definitely should keep Pete Alonso. They shouldn't trade him whatsoever. And David Stearns wanted Pete Alonso in Milwaukee. That's why the Mets tried before last season to get Pete Alonso, but they were rebuffed. And then at the trade deadline, they tried to get Pete Alonso as well, but they were rebuffed. So David Stearns has wanted Pete Alonso for a long time, and he would be absolutely foolish to deal Pete Alonso. And as far as the Buck Showalter news is concerned, I'm not surprised, because when you have a new president of baseball operations coming in, like a guy like David Stearns or an Andrew Friedman or Farhan Zaidi, you have to let them pick their own manager, because when you have a GM not having his own guy, then it always causes tension, it always causes friction, and it's always very, very awkward. And for a GM that is of a magnitude like those high-ranking officials like Stearns and Friedman and Zaidi, you got to let them pick their own guy, and they want to have their own guy line up with them philosophically. So I'm not really surprised that Buck Showalter is gone. I would have been shocked if he had stayed on with the Mets. And as far as who should replace him, I think I agree with you, Loro. It's 100% going to be Craig Counsell, because Craig Counsell, he's going to get let go from the Brewers because of what happened tonight after they got swept. We'll talk about that, the D-backs sweeping the Brewers later on in the show, but the Brewers should have gone much deeper than losing and getting swept out of the wild card round. They should have gone to at least the divisional round. They should have gone maybe to even the NLCS. But Craig Counsell, if he goes to New York, he'll get a team that has more talent, a bigger payroll to work with, an owner that wants to spend. And also, Craig Counsell's probably going to get a larger salary because he's one of the best managers in all of baseball, and Steve Cohen's going to give him whatever he wants. So, and it just makes a lot of sense that David Stearns, the former Milwaukee president of baseball ops, is also there as well. So they have a connection dating back to their days in Milwaukee. So that makes too much sense not to happen. I fully expect Craig Counsell to be the next manager of the New York Mets. And unless the Mets severely fumble it, there's no chance Craig Counsell is staying in Milwaukee.